Council. It's my pleasure to host this virtual meeting as a part of our effort to stay connected during this difficult time. I'm pleased to be joined tonight by two individuals I'm proud to have helping lead our conversation. Mickey Fern, who's the city's consultant on citizen engagement, and Reverend Paul Anderson, who's a longtime resident of District A and is the leader and pastor of the Fountain of Raleigh on Six Forks Road. Also, I want to offer my sincere thanks to the city staff that's working behind the scenes to facilitate this meeting. Let me briefly go over the format for this meeting, orient you to the Zoom call interface so that we can make the most of our time together, and then we'll get started. Tonight's meeting will be in three parts. First, we will hear reports from RPD and our city staff in the Parks, Stormwater, and Planning departments. Second, we will have an introduction and update from Mickey Fern on improving citizen engagement in Raleigh. And third, we'll have an open mic style session led by Reverend Anderson, where we'll invite you to offer your concerns, ask questions, and we'll have a little bit more of an interactive feedback session. As hosts for this meeting, we're going to ask that all participant lines stay muted during the first two agenda items to ensure that we stay on schedule. We will be using a few Zoom meeting functions during these portions of the meeting to allow for interaction. And let me orient you briefly to those functions. So in the Zoom setup, you see at the bottom of your screen a few tools that we're going to be using tonight. First is the chat function. And if you click on the chat function, it'll open a box to the right where you can communicate directly with other people that are on the line. For example, friends and neighbors, if you'd like to greet them and let them know, you can use the pull-down menu to talk privately with an individual. Alternatively, you can post to everyone that's in the meeting using this chat function. And right next to the chat function is the participants list, where you can see the names of folks who are on this meeting with us, and you can use two functions that we will use later in the meeting. Those are the voting function and the raise hand function. So we'll revisit some of this later in the meeting to ensure everybody's comfortable with the format. And I'm sure by now, several months into our COVID situation, most of us have done lots of Zoom meetings, so I'm sure lots of you are very familiar. So just to get us started, I'd like to try one of these now. If you could open the participants list, and at the bottom, if you would use the voting functions to indicate yes if you live in District A, or no if you live in another part of the city. Let's try and vote now. See some votes coming in. Again, the participants button at the bottom of the screen will open this list where you can use the voting yes and no. See those votes coming in. We got a strong District A presence and glad to have everybody from North Raleigh. And of course, everyone's welcome to this meeting, and I am glad that you all are here. This is intended to be a public meeting, open to all, but as the District A representative on council, I'll ask that we focus to some extent on issues relevant to North Raleigh. I do want to hear from everybody, although I'd ask that we allow the folks in District A to participate fully, and then we'll open it up to everyone else, time permitting. Later in the meeting, we're going to use that raise hand function to get an order for taking comments. And again, we'll revisit this again when the time comes. So again, I'm grateful that you joined the meeting tonight as we try to stay connected as a community during this difficult time when we can't gather in person together. We're all doing the best we can, and it's important to me that everyone finds some value in participating in this call, whether you have some specific issue that you need to bring to my attention, or if you're here to learn more about improving citizen engagement in Raleigh. As I mentioned earlier, in tonight's meeting, we'll have reports from city staff, and then we'll give some time for Mickey Fern to update us on his work improving in citizen engagement. We have reserved about 15 minutes for questions for Mickey, and we're going to welcome you to use the chat function to submit these questions. We will only take questions from the chat section and that's solely to keep us on schedule with our agenda. And then starting about 8:15, we'll introduce Reverend Anderson, who will lead our community concern session. And during that time, we're going to use the chat function, but also the raise hand. And with the help of our moderator, one of those city staff folks that's working behind the scenes, we'll call on you, unmute your line, allow you to make comments or ask questions. I do want to mention that after the listening session in the springtime, due to technical difficulties, I was not able to capture contact information for everyone joining the call. So if you're waiting to hear back from me on an answer, please just drop me an email, send me a chat during the meeting, give me a call. Contact information in the chat box in just a few minutes, and I certainly welcome you to get in touch. So with that, we'll move into our first agenda item, reports from the city staff. And our first report tonight is from the Raleigh Police Department. And I'm glad to have Lieutenant Manukas from the RPD to be with us. And thank you for your service to the city. This has been a particularly difficult time to be a police officer in our city. And I know that many people in our city appreciate the work that y'all do to keep us safe. And Lieutenant Manukas, thank you for being with us.
I appreciate it, sir. And thanks for the opportunity to be here. I will be brief. There's not a whole lot to go over. I sent some statistics out, what it looks like this year. We compared to our last year's numbers from January 1st through September 10th. And our numbers look fairly good. There's a couple categories in here that we do have a little bit of concern for, but I think we have a good explanation for why they're on the rise. The majority of the things that we're looking at through this year have gone down, some significantly. The only red flag that we see in here is our commercial burglaries that have gone up from 17 this time last year to actual 53 of them. Doing some research based on the numbers alone looks pretty bad. But when we look at it and where a lot of those incidents occurred, they occurred due to the protests and riots that we saw that spread north into North Raleigh on, unfortunately, that Sunday night, which hit North Hills and some other locations within our district. We had the majority of our increase in burglaries, in commercial burglaries, because of those incidents. So there is some sort of explanation for that. But as far as numbers go, we look pretty good. We are coming into the holiday season. I know it's weird to say with everything that we've had. And what we want to remind people is with the holidays coming up, we want to make sure that we're doing a better job of, for example, larceny motor vehicles always come up this time of year. We want to make sure that citizens are locking their car doors, making sure that their purses and valuables are not within plain view, especially in the areas of the malls that we're looking at. That's always a big thing. Our community squad will be working with community leaders and shopping centers to make sure we can get some flyers out to remind people to keep their valuables locked in their vehicle safely. Some other things that we're doing within the community to try to bring some of these numbers down is our community squad has just engaged in a homeless project to get them identified and any help that we can assist them with. As the chief has mentioned, we're starting a new unit, the Acorn unit, which will be made of social workers and officers that will deal with some of the homeless issues and any help that they can provide the homeless issues and citizens at that point, at that time. We're working towards solving some of this problem with the begging and some other homeless issues that we have out there. As far as numbers go, I think that's pretty much all we have to really talk about and go over because the numbers otherwise look pretty good. So that's all I have.
Great, thanks for that report. And as with Lieutenant Manukas and each of the city staff folks that are presenting tonight, feel free to drop them questions in the chat box. Either you can ask it to everyone so that everyone can see it, or you can reply directly to the staff person that's presenting. We have asked these folks to hang around for a few minutes to see if questions come in. And about 7:30, they'll start dropping off. So if you have questions for any of these city staff folks that are making reports, please feel free to communicate with them through the chat box. And we'll be showing some contact information, other ways you can get in touch with them in just a few minutes. Our second report tonight is from the Parks Department with Stephen Bentley, who's an assistant director with the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Department. I've always thought Stephen may have the coolest job in the whole city government because he gets to work on building new parks and greenways every single day. Stephen, thanks for being with us.
Yep, thank you, Councilmember Buffkin. My name is Stephen Bentley. I'm one of the assistant directors in the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Department. While the presentation is coming up, I'll share a little bit about what I'm going to cover tonight, which is really the status of the park system, some of the things that we've worked on the last few months, and some of the things that we have ahead of us. And I also have my contact information in here on a slide. I'd welcome anybody to reach out. And I will monitor the meeting for a good portion of time, but if I miss some of your information later in the meeting during Mr. Fern's presentation, my information is attached in the PowerPoint. Okay, so get this started here, bear with me. Trying to move the slide. Stacy, I don't think I'm allowed to move it right now.
If you can go ahead and click on the actual slide and then click on the page.
There we go. That seemed, I'm not getting a rejection noise. There we go. Okay, thank you for bearing with us. Again, I just have about 5 minutes to share with you the status of the park system. When the governor issued the stay home orders, our park spaces, our open spaces, and our greenways actually remained open. A lot of us weren't used to that, so I put in two interesting bullets here that in your district at Durant Nature Park, actually from July of last year to the July of this year, we saw an 80% increase in visitation, people just wanting to get outside and enjoy the outdoors. In some locations along our greenways, our greenway counters recorded 300% increase in visitation compared to last year. As we moved through the governor's orders to 2.0, phase 2.0, park facilities began to open and some of the amenities began to open. Currently, all our parks and greenways and playgrounds are open, and effective about 2 weeks ago, all of our facilities reopened. Now, they reopened with limitations, and those limitations were based on gathering limits issued by the governor and the COVID team. The locations within your district, Sertoma Arts is looking at how fall and winter programming are going to look, the same with Optimist and Millbrook Exchange. We are actually beginning to develop our adult baseball and softball leagues for this later this fall and early winter. One of the things we're really proud of, Millbrook Tennis Center opened up in June, but our instruction is set to open up in October. One of the big things that we did as a city is we partnered with Wake County and a lot of the nonprofits, including the YMCA and the Girls and Boys Club, on what we call our REC program, which is Recreation and Education Center program. It's designed for elementary and middle school students. It allows students to come to different centers around the city, participate in healthy and productive activities. It gets the kids and teens outside, as well as connects them virtually. We increase some of our technology capabilities at our community centers so that the online virtual learning is accessible to all those that attend the REC program. Okay, I'm going to shift a little bit to projects now. So the projects that we have completed, and this is the last 3 to 6 months, we've completed site lighting improvements at Millbrook Exchange Park. We have renovated the interior to Eastgate Neighborhood Center, and we have fully renovated and replaced the North Hills Playground. So those are projects completed. We have a couple projects under construction. We have relocated the Shelley Lake restrooms just off of the Greenway, closer to the parking lot. And the location of the existing restroom will actually become an overlook for the lake. We also had, 2 years ago, we had multiple locations along Crabtree Creek, which were impacted by hurricanes. So we're redoing some retaining walls along Crabtree Creek. Now, Crabtree Creek Greenways had some closures. Some of those closures are related to the ongoing improvements by the Public Utilities Department. Projects we have under design, probably the most exciting project in District A right now is we're designing a covered court and multi-purpose area at Bailiwick Park. So it'll be about 8,000 to 10,000 square foot covered. You can have farmers markets, we'll say performance space, but it'll have all different courts from volleyball courts to basketball courts marked underneath that covered area. We're doing sport field lighting improvements at Cedar Hills and Brook. A lot of our lighting is 20 to 30 years old. We're replacing a dated bridge along Crabtree Creek, and we just completed a plan in conjunction with NC State University on a new nature play area at Durant. Two big planning initiatives I'd like to hire specifically for the Parks Department is we're updating our Greenway Master Plan, which has been the first time in over 20 years. And we're just starting a dialogue about what public art looks like in the city across the entire city. And with that, I wanted to make sure everybody has my contact information. I'll check the chat and follow up with any questions, either directly or to the entire group. But if you'd like to take it offline, my phone number is there, and I'm happy to contact anybody after this meeting. So thank you.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Stephen. You know, our parks and greenways have been such a respite during the last 6-8 months, and it's just so wonderful to see folks getting out there, and the statistics on greenway usage during the last 6 or 8 months have just been off the charts, as you saw. So glad you could be here to share that information with us. Thanks again. In our third report tonight, we are going to hear from Wayne Miles, who is Stormwater Program Manager with the Stormwater Division. Much of North Raleigh was developed prior to Raleigh having stormwater regulations, so we keep Wayne and his team quite busy, and glad to have you with us. Wayne?
Great, thank you, Councilmember Buffkin. Appreciate the opportunity to participate in your virtual town hall. We have been very busy, and in fact, despite rumors to the contrary, we cannot control the weather, but there do happen to be some very intense thunderstorms moving into Raleigh as we speak. And so during these types of events, we do keep an eye on stream gauges. We look at reports for flooding. We do have traffic cameras that we watch in situations where there may be road flooding suspected. And some of you may have seen fairly recently, we've installed flood warning signs that do flash when roadways become flooded. So if you see those roads flashing, be very cautious. It means there's water on the road and leading to a flooding situation. I'd like to give an overview of the stormwater program. We work very closely with a permanent citizens group called the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission. 10 citizens appointed by City Council that really are intended to represent the community at large and guide us in stormwater policy, stormwater project priorities, help us with budgets, and to fulfill the core mission. It really is to manage stormwater to preserve, protect life, support natural resources, and complement sustainable growth. And we do a lot to support that core mission. I can't go into everything, but there's a wide variety of programs within the Stormwater Division that support that core mission. Touching on just a few, floodplain management. A key element I'd like to talk to tonight is we are in the process of proposing revisions to our floodplain regulations, and we'll be doing a campaign this fall, so keep an eye out. But the primary proposed change associated with that regulation is that we will extend new development restrictions throughout the floodplain. So on this photo here, the blue area closest to the creek is the floodway. We have new development restrictions in the floodway right now, but those restrictions will be extended to what's called the floodway fringe, which is the purplish pink area. So the entire floodplain will have restrictions. So if you're interested in commenting, we would love to hear your input on these proposed changes. Keep an eye out for information on that. And that will go through the rest of this fall. And we are proposing to bring back a final decision to City Council early next year. We do a lot of water quality related work. Those of you who may drive on Sandy Forks Road perhaps have seen some of our green stormwater infrastructure along that road. Here's an example of a bioretention device aimed at really further retaining stormwater, infiltrating, helps reduce nuisance flooding as well as improving water quality. Some other examples down at Raleigh Union Station of green stormwater infrastructure that were incorporated into the renovations of that facility. We also do development reviews. We review plans for third-party private projects as well as city projects to make sure they're all in compliance with city stormwater regulations. And we also inspect construction to make sure that the soil and erosion control devices are being properly maintained. But we do get citizens telling us about concerns. We, especially on very rainy days, are not able to get to every construction site around the city. So if you do see concerns, please take a picture, email it to me. We'll get our inspectors right out there as quickly as possible. It's always very helpful to have pictures, videos of any concerns or issues that you're seeing. We have a drainage assistance program that helps provide funding to address flooding issues on private property in homes, or if there's key structures like a driveway that's washed out or at risk. We do help fund projects to repair those situations. And community engagement and outreach is really a key part of our program. During hurricane season, we have an emergency preparedness sessions. We have stream cleanups. Lots of art related projects. So if anyone's interested in getting engaged, please visit our website. There are a lot of opportunities. And to give a high level overview, we have a lot of stormwater work going on in District A. As Councilmember Buffkin said, you all keep us very busy, but that's a good thing. We want to continue to improve the performance of our stormwater system, protect water quality, improve water quality. So we do have an active capital improvements project. The green boxes are projects that are either underway or about to get started in the very near future. And then there's a number of other smaller projects that we have identified as future projects in the district. But we welcome your input. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns, and appreciate everyone's support.
Thank you, Wayne, for such an important issue. It's really nice to have you with us tonight, and thank you for that update.
Glad to help. Thank you for the invitation.
Anytime, anytime. And I promise we'll keep you busy.
Okay, very good. We like it.
Our final report tonight is from the Planning Department with Jason Harden, who is a senior planner with the city's Planning Department and has been a key staff leader on the Walkable Midtown Plan that is currently under review by the Planning Commission. Jason, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, and good to be here. Good evening, everybody. It's good to see. I see a lot of people in the meeting that I've gotten to know at one point or another, either through the Midtown Plan or other planning conversations throughout the city of Raleigh. And one of the great things about my job is you do get to meet a lot of people and have these great conversations about the future of our city. So I'm going to talk just briefly about the Midtown Plan and where that stands. So it's close to the point of completion. Many of you on the call, I know, have participated in that planning effort over, honestly, almost the last 2 years now. It's been little bit delayed this year in the home stretch due to COVID, but it's the fruit of a lot of community conversations and the collective vision of Midtown residents to see a Midtown that, as the name suggests, is more walkable and more of a true place, not just a place that people are passing through on the way to somewhere else, but a place that is a true place within Raleigh. And I'm going to hit the highlights. There's a lot of information on the project page for this planning effort, including upcoming meeting dates of the Planning Commission. But the way the plan document was structured is it's designed to be really easy to understand the big ideas. And that's what I'm going to talk through this evening. And if you want to go into the details, that's there too. And you can reach out to me or look at what we have online. But the planning area, just to orient everybody, it does go from Six Forks in the west to Atlantic in the east, and Millbrook Road, a little bit north of Millbrook Road, but generally Millbrook in the north and down to Six Forks and the Crabtree Creek in the south. And the overall focus, thinking about how to make this more of a place, catch up on the infrastructure on the public side. There have been some significant changes, certainly around North Hills in terms of private development, and making sure that on the city side of things, we've got the infrastructure in place there to be able to not just handle those demands, but to, again, create a great place for Midtown residents and visitors. So the process actually began in 2018 with some initial visioning efforts where we just want to understand what are the big issues to tackle. And that's where that theme of walkability began to emerge, just a huge issue for people. I think that so many of y'all see a lot of great places in Midtown, but frankly, they're often hard to walk to. Even if you're really close to them, you're divided by a belt line or a Six Forks or something that's just kind of uncomfortable, or even in some cases, not as safe as we would like it to be to walk. So a lot of in-person meetings, you can see some pictures from those, and online activity in 2019, published the final report, Walkable Midtown, in 2020. Did have a group of residents and other stakeholders that helped to make sure that the engagement process was robust and complete. And again, the Planning Commission review is underway. Often that's where there's conversations about some details or some issues here and there. And hopefully at the end of that process, everybody's more or less on the same page and deliver a set of recommendations to City Council that everybody has a pretty good feeling about. So I mentioned those 7 big moves. Those are the big ideas. I like to say, if you understand these big moves, you understand the plan. If you want to dive deeper, you can. But the biggest one, or at least the one I've included first here, and it is a really big one, is crossing the belt line. So right now, the belt line does a lot for the area. It certainly is a major piece of infrastructure, but it also funnels all trips into a couple of pretty busy interchanges, as y'all know, and it really serves as a barrier for pedestrian activity. So 2 new bridges, one for cars and transit and people walking and biking between Six Forks and Wake Forest, and one that would be just a pedestrian and bicycle connection a little bit further to the east near the new Wegmans and Wake Tech and some of the things that are beginning to happen in that part of the Midtown area. Number 2, green streets. And that's the concept that on some neighborhood streets, there's some pretty wide pieces of asphalt that contribute a lot of stormwater runoff. They contribute to higher vehicle speeds. And so the idea here is to use essentially a green stormwater infrastructure and beautification project to start to slow down those cars, absorb some stormwater, and create a safe and protected place for people walking and biking. So what you end up with is, or can be, almost an on-street greenway connection. So extending our wonderful greenway network into the neighborhood. So it's much easier to access those greenways and the places that they connect. Number 3, the idea of connected streets. So as y'all know, most of the heavy transportation lifting is the Beltline, and there's a couple of other streets. And compared to downtown or say Cameron Village or other parts of the city, there's not that more connected grid, which tends to make things a lot easier for people walking. It tends to improve the resiliency from the standpoint of people driving. And so allowing for some alternatives other than, again, those handful of streets that can often get pretty busy. Improving transit. Right now, Midtown, the area has no what we would call frequent transit. So that would be where the bus is arriving 15 minutes or less. And that's at the point at which you start to not have to worry about the schedule because you know that a bus is going to be coming within just a few minutes. And so going from no frequent routes to 3 in the future, linked by a transit center, which would provide a place for transfers and some comfortable seating as people are waiting on the bus. That location hasn't been determined, but somewhere in the heart of the area near North Hills. The Midtown Ring, I've talked a couple of times about safer places to walk or bike. And a big part of the plan's concept is to create a more walkable Midtown, more chances for healthy lifestyles, to be able to, whether it's for recreation or to shop or work, to get around in a more active way. And of course, a significant carbon emissions project here as well, to where we can facilitate trips that aren't always driving trips. And so the concept here is to create a fully protected and separated loop that spans the Beltline with those 2 bridges and connects the Greenway to all the major destinations within Midtown and the residential neighborhood, so everyone has access to this facility. Here's an example from Charlotte about what this kind of facility and the places that can grow around it can look like. The idea of Midtown Living, Midtown Works, that's that in certain places, one of the things that we heard about were a need for more affordable housing options and just more housing choice in general. And of course, employment opportunities are also really important. So in a couple of key places within the Midtown area, looking at opportunities to incentivize more affordable housing units and allow more opportunities for living and working in the area, while being careful, and this is something we heard a lot about as well, to make sure that those larger scale mixed use areas transition down to nearby neighborhoods. And then lastly, the idea of a Midtown waterfront district and waterfront park. Historically, the area, the city has turned its back on the Crabtree in this location. You've got parking lots and some warehouses and some vacant buildings. There's the opportunity here, and other cities across the country have used this kind of opportunity to create a place that's oriented to the waterfront and to have a condition that doesn't exist in Raleigh, where you have a lively, walkable, urban place next to a water feature like the Crabtree here. And so looking at opportunities to do some additional planning, potentially for, again, a waterfront park opportunity, and to create a really lively waterfront district that everybody can enjoy in the area, or this would even be, I think, a citywide scale kind of project. So that's what I have. That's a quick overview. There's a lot in there. I encourage you to go to the project page. I'll put that in the chat, the link to get there. And of course, reach out to me directly with any questions that you have. And thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you, Jason. That certainly is an exciting plan for the Midtown area, and looking forward to receiving the Planning Commission's recommendation. And that process is ongoing. So if you want to have your voice heard, the Planning Commission consideration is underway, and you have Jason's contact information, so I'm sure he can help you get to the right place, or as the case may be, the right virtual meeting to participate in that process. Thanks again, Jason. And thank you to each of the city staff folks that were with us tonight for presentations. Again, you have their contact information, and they are here and going to hang out for a few more minutes to see what questions come into the chat box. But you are welcome to reach out to these folks directly with your questions, and they will get back to you with answers. And again, thank you all for being here. So before we transition to our next agenda item, I'd like to recognize the presence of one of my colleagues on council. City Councilor at Large Nicole Stewart has joined us. And if the moderator could unmute her line, I want to give Nicole a chance to say hello to everybody.
Hey y'all, thanks so much, Councilmember Buffkin. It's great to see everybody. I gotta say, as an extrovert, I miss seeing you so much. So it's really lovely to see all your faces, and I hope you're doing well and hanging in there during these incredibly strange and challenging times. So thanks so much, and I just wanted to say, hey, thank you.
Well, we're glad to have you here, Nicole. And it really is a challenging time, especially for folks with young kids like Nicole. And, you know, our hearts are with you while you're managing working from home and schooling from home and everything else we're doing at home. So thanks again for being here. Now let's move to our discussion on the city's updates to community engagement with Mickey Fern. Mickey, can you join us and tell us a little bit about yourself and then take it away with an update on citizen engagement? Let's see, I need to get you. There you go, Mickey.
Yeah, I think we're there. And I've got a presentation somewhere. I think Stacy's going to put it up. But while we're waiting for that, I'm Mickey Fern. I am first and foremost a citizen of Raleigh, a resident of Raleigh. I live at 201 Lord Berkeley. I believe I saw Doug Sutton on the call, and his son built my house. I've been here for about 7 years. Up until last spring, I was a professor at North Carolina State University. I have, since I've been here, I've been joined with Dix Park at the hip. I've been doing some work with Parks and Recreation. I've been doing some work with climate action, simply as a citizen, not as a consultant. And I want to kind of stress that we separate those roles because I am a citizen of Raleigh, and I am concerned about community engagement from the standpoint of being a citizen, not a paid person or a hired gun that's come in to make changes. So I just want to say that. I've been involved in government for 54 years. I've been involved in community engagement for 32 of those years. And in the city of Seattle, I was the director of something called the Neighborhood Leadership Project, which was charged with reforming community engagement in Seattle, and was asked to create the architecture for the first municipal equity initiative. So I just wanted to let people know that that I'm coming here and I'm trying to apply all those things that I've learned in my 54 years in government to the city that I live in now. So let me see if I can make this work. Okay, so and I ask this question every time I do one of these, so people have a real good understanding of what I've been asked to do. I've been asked to facilitate a process that uses the collective creative energy, talent, resources, wisdom of the City Council, our public servants, and our residents to inform the strategic evolution of Raleigh's community engagement activities, processes, and systems. And it's to do all of those things. And I understand there's some concerns about the CACs and the CAC functions, and that is certainly a part of what I'm engaged in, but I'm also engaged in what community engagement looks like in the city of Raleigh generally. All right, who have I been meeting with? I've met with lots of CACs and their leaders and their members. I've met with individual residents who have been engaged and some who haven't been engaged. I've talked to community organizations. I'm about to have a meeting with the Chamber of Commerce about some things we're interested in doing. I've been working with city department heads. We sent them a survey and they're all sending a survey back about how they understand community engagement in their department. I've been working really closely with the community engagement team that's under the leadership of Larry Jarvis and Linda Jones. Of course, working with city councilors, city staff, and I've been doing a good bit of research on what other municipalities are doing. All right, and so I'm going to share with you kind of what I'm learning about this from talking to other people. And there have to be underlying values to the community engagement process. And what that means is that any activity we engage in has to be aligned with certain values. Otherwise, it creates a certain amount of ambiguity and unevenness that causes the community engagement to be different in different places. And so the ones I most frequently see are trust. And there seems to be a huge problem with trust in the city of Raleigh, equity. 26% or something like 32% of the citizens who live in Raleigh are people of color, and 60% are renters, yet we don't see those people engaging in public process unless they're angry or afraid. Transparency is important. Communication is really important, and that's something that I've got to do better at. I'm going to have a website up toward the end of this week or the first of next week. It's my personal website, but there'll be a link to the work I'm doing for the city of Raleigh, where people can see who I'm talking to, what I'm talking about. If people have thoughts or ideas that they want to let me know about, they can use it for that. We may be able to create some kind of blog or dialogue, but that's coming. Collaboration is also critical. Credibility, inclusion, healing, and continuous learning. And I put healing on there because there's a tremendous amount of acrimony in the city about how things have happened way before I got here that's still affecting the way things are happening now. And it's creating some festering hostility and some antagonistic cooperation, which is actually kind of keeping us, from achieving the things that I think we need to achieve. All right, what are we learning? I'm certainly learning. I need to go back. Okay. I'm certainly learning that community engagement needs to be practiced as a city value, not as a set of disparate activities that are designed to help the city make good policy, budget, or program decisions. And if it's an organizational value, it needs to live in the heart of the organization. And it's evident in all the organization's policies, procedures, transactions, decisions, and activities. I've found that there are people in city departments who don't believe they do community engagement, and that's not true for anybody. The fact is, the city of Raleigh, the most fundamental community engagement is the thousands of transactions that take place every day between citizens and their government. So I think every city employee is somehow involved in that in some way. But community engagement, it doesn't seem to be in the heart of the organization. If you see the balloon on the other side, it's outside, it's trying to fight its way in to a homeostatic state, a way that we have been doing that. And one of the problems with that homeostatic state is I think the traditional rituals and processes and procedures of traditional community engagement have blinded us to innovative and creative possibilities in terms of getting citizens involved. This next statement wasn't a part of my presentation, but I'm beginning to feel in a really intense way that a gathering is what makes the democratic process work. The democratic process is about people getting together. And I've certainly learned that over the last 5 or 6 months where we haven't been able to get together and do the things that people do. We get together to learn, we get together to make decisions, we get together to celebrate, we get together to heal. In the absence of being able to get together like that, I think people are feeling very badly. There's kind of a low level of depression. So, all right, so I'm learning that. I'm learning you can't solve a problem until you realize you're part of the problem you're trying to solve. And whether we're talking about the council people or the people involved in CACs or citizens who don't get involved at all and complain, the reality is each of us needs to take a good introspective look inside ourselves to see what we may be doing that is having a negative impact on what we're trying to create. And I'm not trying to do that from the standpoint of blame or being accusatory. I'm simply saying that we all need to consistently be introspective about who we are and what we want and what we need to understand how we're impacting the process. For every act of creativity, there's an act of destruction. Typically in the work I've been involved in government, it's kind of been innovative work. And you find out when you begin to talk about changing things, when you begin to talk about something new, that people will always gravitate to the way it's been done. This is not my quote, this is a Picasso quote. For every act of creativity, there's an act of destruction, and people are more likely to focus on the destruction than they are to focus on the possibility. So I think we're in a place here where we're capable of doing some unbelievable things with community engagement, learning with people who are learning it from people who are doing well, as well as coming up with our own things. So, and I found out that in the city of Raleigh, there's a lot of unevenness. I spent a lot of time doing equity work and a lot of time doing community engagement work. And wherever you've got diversity, you've got unevenness. And that unevenness may manifest itself in several ways. People have different passions about this work. People have different levels of understanding. People have different personal and organizational histories with the work. People have personal needs. People have justifiable skepticism. They've been disappointed so many times by government that they really don't know or believe that government has their best interests at heart. There's unevenness in terms of the needs of our community. The things we have in certain parts of Raleigh and the overused term of Southeast Raleigh and East Raleigh are very different than the needs of people in Briar Creek. People's personal dispositions about it. We're uneven as it relates to ethnicity, socioeconomic status. Something like 50% of the people in the city of Raleigh rent, and we know that across the country, renters don't attend public process. They tend to move every 2 years, and so they never get vested in a community, and therefore, when there are community meetings, they don't have the same kind of interest. We're uneven in terms of demographics, and we're uneven in terms of how we calculate something called return on investment. For people who have success working in government, they get engaged because they know that what they think means something to people, but people who have been disappointed don't understand why they would invest the time and energy in doing something when they haven't historically received an adequate return on that investment. So in the city of Raleigh here right now, we're in something called a muddle period. And what that means is we aren't what we were and we're not what we're gonna be. So we're in this period where there's a tug on the behalf of some people to, well, if this isn't working, let's just go back to the way it was before. And for others, let's move forward. It's doing this muddle period as it relates to change in general, where things get paralyzed. And if we don't make it through this muddle period, then we're gonna have some kind of chaotic community engagement process that is not necessarily working for everybody. All right, in terms of what we need to learn, we have an obligation to understand what inclusionary, equitable, participatory community engagement is. And we need to really understand how race, ethnicity, culture, and socioeconomic status, and some other defining demographics impact community engagement. And so what we know about that is poor ethnic people tend to get involved, as I said before, when they're angry or afraid. Immigrants and refugees certainly don't get involved as other people do. As I mentioned, renters. When we look at our young people, and one of the questions I continue to ask myself is who is responsible for developing the next generation of big citizens? Who has that responsibility? And I haven't been able to identify that yet. I just did meet with the Caldwell Fellows at North Carolina State University last week to start talking about getting them engaged and beginning to work with young people to understand the importance of getting involved in democratic process. So there are four areas. There are four areas of the work emerging. One is analysis and assessment, which has to do with what are we doing, how are we doing it, how do we know if we're successful, who's measuring it, and then there's creating a work plan. And I don't think that there is a city department that has a responsibility for creating that community engagement work plan. There is creativity and innovation that needs to occur. And then we need to manage the relationships, because this work is creating some very difficult dynamics. And those difficult dynamics can, in fact, paralyze the process. When people look at this work across the country, they're certainly willing to do work as it relates to analysis and assessment. and create a plan. But I find that there's very little creativity and innovation, and that people tend to let the relationships go and fester and not manage the very difficult dynamics that community engagement creates. So what I'm seeing in the city, and a definition of community engagement is that we harness and focus the creative energy of 500,000 citizens toward creating great government. And I'm saying, and I think we're wasting a lot of that talent and energy. I don't think we have a difficult time distinguishing between meetings and gatherings. We need internal and external collaboration. We need a civic innovation system. I was asking people that I was meeting with recently, if you had an idea about how you wanted something to happen in Raleigh, do you know who you would take that idea to? And I think depending on people's status in the city, they have people that they can go to, but there are people who have great ideas who don't know who they would go to if they wanted somebody to take their idea seriously. And there's a sense of urgency. And everybody has a sense of urgency, but we have to be careful that that sense of urgency doesn't create cathartic reactions that create bad solutions, as opposed to creating well thought out responses. And if we don't pay attention to all of this, I think my fear is the future will be an extension of the past. And that's not to say the past was bad, that there was anything wrong with the way we were doing it. For what I'm finding is that we just aren't reaching the variety of citizens that we need to reach. I've been working with the community engagement team, and I find them to be creative, energetic, and collaborative, and committed, and helpful, and knowledgeable. And we talk on several times a week about how we use them to begin to communicate with the citizenry about how this needs to work. All right, so the questions you ask about a work plan are, do we have a community engagement strategy? And I read a report that was done in 2004 about CACs and about neighborhood registries. That was one of the best assessments of community engagement I'd ever seen, but I'm not sure what happened with that. You know, they talked about CACs, they talked about neighborhood registries, they talked about the education programs that go on in the community engagement office, and some of those things are happening, but I don't know what happened to the recommendations. And it's a really important thing to understand, because we could create whatever we're going to create now, and the same thing could happen to it. I think we need to have department work plans so that every department understands how it can contribute in the most powerful way to community engagement. That plan needs to talk about what activities we need to initiate. And I should say, I don't have a plan to make a report in 10 months and then create something. My idea is to be experimenting with things every step along the way. So not only are we conducting innovative community engagement responses, but we're learning from those things, and we learn what works or doesn't work. I could probably write the report now, but even if I did not get people engaged right now in activities, I would be writing a report based on what I thought would happen, rather than engaging activities along the way that inform the process. So we need a plan for increasing our capacity to engage in inclusionary, equitable community engagement. And does our plan include engaging residents as co-creators? In other words, rather than residents simply benefiting or enduring the programs and services that we create, how do we engage citizens as co-creators and partners? All right, that's not an important slide. I'll move on from that. All right, so right now, part of what I'm seeing in some sectors and talking to some people is a lot of pain, emotion, cynicism, tension, and all those things you see on that slide, based on having been injured or hurt by historical practices. And this goes back a ways. I mean, it just doesn't go back to the election of this council. As I'm talking to people, this seems to go back quite a ways. So when this moment occurs, people quit. They come up with what we call low capacity solutions. There's antagonistic cooperation. There's festering hostility. There's people constantly describing the problem without describing the solution. There's blame. There's reciprocal victimization, and all of that stuff goes on. And all of that's going on now. I think what I'm encouraged by is, even though most people who are feeling this way are feeling, as I talk to them, are feeling very positive about what the possibilities might be. But if we don't begin to sort of fix the human dynamics, then I'm sure it's going to paralyze the process. All right, so who is responsible for assessing the impact of community engagement? How are we doing with our current activities? How do we know? What metrics do we use? Are activities and processes reflective of the demographics of our community? And I haven't found that there is an agency within city government who has the responsibility to do this kind of assessment. I think there are lots of departments who have pieces of it, but I haven't seen where the whole thing comes together. All right, so, and then we have to do something called managing our civic ecosystem. So it's not just looking at episodic community engagement when something comes up. We can't just engage citizens when we need them. We need to try to get citizens engaged all the time, because then when we need them, they'll be familiar with who we are and what we are and how we work. And then it's a lot easier to get them engaged. But our civic system includes economic things, social things, cultural things, technical things. You can read those things there. And all of those things need to be a part of community engagement. I also find that in managing the civic ecosystem, we need to pay attention to how nature works. And nature lays it out there pretty well for us, that nature doesn't work unless there's diversity, order, and then periodically there's randomness, and then there's chaos, and we adapt. This is certainly going on now. In my lifetime, I'm 73 years old, I've never seen anything like the kind of circumstances that cities are experiencing now. And we will be judged by how well we adapt to the randomness and chaos that we see, but we have to make sure, again, that we don't react. We have to make sure that we create a strategic response to the challenges that we're experiencing. So I've been thinking about doing this personally for a long time, but I'm asking, I see in government, when we start talking about changing things, we often talk about what will happen if we don't do something. What will happen, for instance, if we don't have parks and children and people don't have stuff to do? What will happen if we don't fund police? And I think that the way I'd like to do this is on what's possible, not focus on what's wrong. So let's focus on what will happen if we do something, as opposed to what happens if we don't do something. Because as we talk about what will happen if we don't do something, that's based on fear, and that creates pathology, and that creates difficult human dynamics. Let's let aspiration, not frustration, be the motivation to address our challenges. And let's focus on what's possible, not focus on what's wrong. Let's, as a value, honor the time and energy, the citizens' time and energy that they invest in government as their important resources, and to make sure we honor that as a resource. We plan and conduct public process that maximizes the residents' return on investment for the time, energy, and resources they commit to community engagement. And we consider public engagement as an investment, not as an expenditure. All right, so moving on. I'm trying to think about what the compelling vision is that would inspire all of us to rise above our self-interest for the collective good. In other words, I think a part of what it means to live in a community is to rise above your self-interest for the collective good. So, so how do we create a vision that inspires people, again, to rise above their individual effort for some collective good? And an inclusionary, participatory, enabling democracy in which citizens are appropriately engaged in the design, delivery, evaluation, evolution of programs and services is one vision. We want all citizens of Raleigh to be safe, healthy, unafraid, prosperous, literate, and live in safe, healthy communities. And then we ask the question, what is the greatest contribution community engagement can make toward that end? When we look at the traditional roles and responsibilities of government, they are to protect the lives and property of citizens, ensure the health and welfare of the citizenry, to maintain sustainable environments, to protect and ensure the wise use of the environment, to provide a safety net for our most vulnerable citizens, to provide and maintain democratic community gathering spaces, to enrich the lives of citizens through education, arts, recreation, and those kinds of things, to create and sustain community spirit, pride, and civility, and ensure the economic vitality of the jurisdiction. Those are commonly accepted reasons for government to exist. And the question I would ask is, does our community engagement process have components that reflect all of those things, or is it simply more concerned with protecting the lives and property and rights of citizens, or ensuring the economic vitality of the city of Raleigh? All right, so then we asked ourselves the question, what is a community? And a community is a place where people rise above their self-interest for the collective good. We're mindful of the collective impact of our individual acts. We're constantly mindful of how our actions, good or bad, impact our neighbors. We look out for each other's interests. We extend our love, trust, respect, credibility to people outside of our community or our affinity groups. Our behaviors are aligned with certain common values. Raleigh is a place where we can all realize our potential. We responsibly pursue our view of happiness without impacting the happiness of other people. And does our community engagement process consider what it takes to create and sustain a community? And so those are questions I'm just asking. So community engagement is a way of ensuring that community members have access to the valued social settings and activities where they feel they can contribute meaningfully to those activities and develop functional capabilities that enable them to function. This is not my statement, this is a Seattle statement that the current Department of Neighborhoods has created for the city of Seattle. So that's the extent of the presentation. I am happy to respond to any questions. Clearly, there's a lot more to talk about, and I've been involved in a lot more things than I've been able to talk about. But let's see what your issues are, and have a conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Mickey.
And Patrick, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. And Nicole, I appreciate you trusting me to be able to do this work too. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mickey. I'm just thrilled that you agreed to be a part of this. And you've got this wealth of experience from all the places you've been. And I've certainly enjoyed chatting with you, and appreciate the efforts you've undertaken so far. So I'm going to do my best. We've got some lively discussion going on in the chat box. I'm going to do my best to try to reflect some of these questions, and then we'll just have a little bit of discussion. So early in your presentation, you noted a loss of trust, and I certainly feel this in terms of trust between the residents of the city and the council, at least among groups of residents. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Can you diagnose the problem? Where was the trust broken, and how might it be repaired?
Yeah, I had to be careful answering that question because it's hard to answer that question without looking like you're blaming somebody. But the reality is, as I'm talking to people, the lack of trust that didn't begin with this council. There are people who didn't trust the last council and the council before that. So the trust issue I think is a trust between, it is an issue between citizens and government. I just read something the other day that said 30 years ago, 80% of Americans said they trusted their neighbors, and that number is now down to 30%. So trust generally in the United States of America is eroding. I think it has something to do with the incivilities in the political process where people feel like the only way they can win is to demonize the person that they're running against, and therefore we're cynical about everything. But trust, for me, trust means that if I trust you with my resources, if I trust you with my feelings, if I trust you with my future, then you will be as careful with those things as I would be if I had those things. And I don't know that city councils have traditionally looked at it like that, but that's how I look at it. I believe if we were going to not focus on what the problem is, but focusing on what the solution is, one of the things that I've seen that builds trust is people working together. People getting together and working together and doing things with each other so that people perceive each other not as antagonists or as enemies, but even though we have different opinions, we still have some common interests. And I don't know that those things have occurred. And I think the problem, part of the problem is nobody's job. It's nobody's job to do that. It's not the council's job to do that. It's not the city manager's job to do that. It's not residents' job to do that. And if it's nobody's job, then that doesn't get done. So I think that that maybe working with the communication department, and I talked to Damon about this, we need to start sending out positive messages about what in the city of Raleigh we need to be proud of, about how we work together. And we need to come together to celebrate and learn and solve problems. And so I think we actually need to create those kinds of activities and experiences. But I want to stay away from saying who's at fault for this, because this isn't only happening in Raleigh, this is happening all over the country. The question is, what are we going to do to make it better? How are we going to create somebody to make it better? So when the mayor of Seattle asked me to create the architecture of the first municipal racial equity initiative, I said to him, I'll do it under two circumstances. One is we have to focus on what's possible, not what's wrong. And I'm not going to convince anybody who's mean. I'm not going to try to spend my time convincing anybody who's mean-spirited or bitter that they need to get involved in this work. I want to work with people who are inclined, people who are capable, again, of rising above their self-interest for the collective good. And it's the citizenry. We need to create this together. This isn't a Mickey Fern job to tell you how this happens, but I'll be happy to participate in the process by which we do this together.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mickey. So we had a few questions about your process going forward. A few about the website. You had mentioned that that's in the works, and I think I understand that your part is now in the hands of the city staff, and they are doing their part to get it posted online. And one question was, will that website have the capability to take feedback from folks that you haven't been able to meet with or talk with on the phone?
Yes, yes, and you know, the reason the website is late is that that my daughter was putting it together for me, and she ran into some medical problems. So we finally got that resolved, and so we have that now. The communication department has it. They're going to create a link, and on that link will be the activities that I've been involved in, the people I'm talking to, what I'm learning, what the events are that are coming up, and a space for people to share their feelings about what they think should be happening with community engagement. I think eventually that should not be on my personal website. I think eventually, if the office or the community engagement group can have their own website, it seems to me that it would be more logical for it to be there. But right now, it's on my personal website, and anybody can have access to it, realizing that I'm talking to 55 people right now. And if all of those 55 people somehow send something on the website tonight, it would take me a while to get through it. So, so I just want people to be patient with me. Okay.
All right. And in terms of well, let me actually before I get to kind of the end result of the process, a couple of people have asked questions about that. How, you know, forecasting maybe not what the answers are, but what might a final report look like. So you can think about that, and I'd really like for you to share with us. You've been through this before with Seattle. How different is this work in this environment when we can't gather together? You spoke to some of that in your presentation.
Yeah, it's horrible. And what I'm saying to you is that democracy is based on gathering. Democracy is based on people coming together and sharing ideas and experiences, and I mean, and celebrating. It weighs on me personally as a person that all of these people that I've been working with and all these people I know, the people at Parks and Recreation, the people at Dick's, the people on the Community Action Plan, and we have not been able to get together to share that personal experience. And there's certain things that happen in a personal experience. There's a certain amount of improvisation and spontaneity that comes up. There's a certain amount of learning that just comes up by virtue of people being together and sharing. And the process of that not happening has really slowed me down, and I think had a tremendous impact on the city. And I just want to say this. I said, you know, I've been talking to people about what's going on in the city of Seattle, as progressive as it is the birthplace of community engagement and passive aggressive behavior. And people in the city of Seattle admit that. A mile of sidewalk costs $300,000 more in Seattle than it does in Tacoma because of public process. So this stuff can go too far. The public process can go too far. We have to decide what is the responsibility of the council, what is the responsibility of city staff, what are the responsibility of citizens. And the other thing that I didn't talk about is citizens accepting their responsibility to be citizens. And what that means is not doing anything that costs government money. What that means is voting. What that democracy is not a spectator form of government. They have to get involved. But in this COVID thing, there's something that's creating a level of depression. I was thinking today that I don't think I've exhaled since March. Between COVID, between the civic disturbances, between all of that stuff, I don't think I've exhaled since March. And I don't know when I'm going to be able to exhale again, but I do know that the only way we can correct this is for us to start to come together and to confront those things that we need to get done, but confront them based on a compelling vision, again, that causes us to rise above our self-interest for the collective good. What is different about Raleigh is Raleigh's a southern city. And I wondered whether I was even going to talk about this or not, but there's still some remnants of the mean and evil southern racism that exists in the city and has created predispositions in people about how things ought to be. And so the African-American community has been around a long time, has been through some of those things, and they felt victimized, they're justifiably skeptical. So that didn't happen in the city of Seattle. That's happening in the city of Raleigh. And there's some healing that needs to happen as a result of that. I think people thought as we just move on that we'll just forget this stuff and it'll just go away. And that's not what's happening. But I also want to reiterate, it's not up to me to come up with anything. It is up to me to facilitate a process using all of the people in the city to figure out what this thing needs to look like. I clearly have some thoughts and ideas based on my 32 years of experience of doing this work about what works and doesn't work. I could probably write a report today, but that report wouldn't have any credibility. It doesn't have any credibility unless I have citizens engaged in it, unless citizens are engaged in it, unless citizens bless it. I have probably done this enough so that I can analyze what some issues are, but then it's just me, and then people can criticize me, and then the whole work goes away. I don't want it to be like that. I want this to come from the citizenry, undeniably coming from the citizenry, so that you can't blame the consultant, or you can't blame the mayor, or you can't blame the council, or you can't blame other people. I want this to come from the citizenry so we all own it.
Well, we certainly all have a role to play, and I'm certainly committed to seeing this be a success, Mickey. And I think we may have time for just one more question. So we've got some pointed questions here, and that's fine. You know, I think basically what I'm hearing in several comments is the broken trust is the council's fault because of the way the council has made its decisions. And I'm certainly aware that feeling is out there. So in terms of fostering this healing and facilitating this conversation, Mickey, you got any advice for all to, you know, work through this?
Yeah. So, you know, I've been talking to I'm a Parks and Recreation guy since 1967. And I was talking to the people at Dick's about raising the recreation IQ for the community. In other words, getting people to understand the importance of parks and recreation in ways that it's never thought about it before. I think we need to raise the community engagement IQ of the city, and that's working with the city council and working with the things that were CACs that are still functioning. I think we need to, everybody needs to go through some capacity building, because people seem to think that their ideas are the best ideas without necessarily having gone through a capacity building process to understand how this works and what's possible. And I think the council needs to go through it. I think the city department heads need to go through it, and city staff need to go through it. And I think residents need to go through it. And maybe we'll include that in the work that the community engagement team does, is to begin to raise people's appreciation of community engagement. What happens when you have a real inclusionary, participatory democracy? But what I'm going to resist at every turn is people suggesting that I have to come up with the answer to this issue, because I'm not going to come up with the answer. I'm going to work tirelessly, and I'm going to work without considering financial situations. I'm going to invest the time and energy in it that takes us to get together to do this collectively. And that's the only way it's going to work.
Great, thanks for that, Mickey. Let me get one more question, because a couple people did have that about the committee that you're working with, or the community engagement team. Who are those folks, and how do they get picked?
Well, the community engagement team is the team that reports to Linda Jones and Larry Jarvis. That's the community
staff folks.
Team. Those are staff folks. Yeah, we have not created the other community. I've gotten a list of names, and you know, here's the struggle with that. Anytime you select somebody, you deselect somebody else, right? And so I know I have to start with a critical mass of people who really understand what it is we're trying to do and who are willing to engage. And they can be critical, but they have to be positive. And so the theory behind this, and it's what Malcolm Gladwell said in The Tipping Point, is we create a critical mass of people who are engaged on working on this. And that critical mass, we extend into a force field. And that force field turns into a tipping point. So even though we're creating a team now, it doesn't mean that that team is the only team, or it's going to be static, or it's not going to grow. I think that we'll probably have something called sequential engagement on the team, so that we involve people during the times that it's necessary. We should be able to have the first group of people together, or we should have the names for that in about a week. But I know what's going to happen. I know we're going to select people, and then we're going to deselect a bunch of people, and then those people are going to become critics. But my intention is to find ways and processes to engage as many people as possible. So even though this team will initiate the process, we will create other teams around other things that people are interested in. So it's not like this team is going to be the only team for 10 months. I would like to get as many people in the city as involved as possible. And then, so there's going to be an internal team in the city, and we're going to expand that so that every department has a representative on that team. And then this other team you're talking about is a combination of people on city staff and people from the community. And we should have some sense of who those people will be sometime next week.
Great, thanks, Mickey. You are, of course, welcome to stay on the line, and your presentation and our discussions generated a lot of chat. We're a little bit behind schedule, with my thanks, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, Mickey. Thanks again for being here. And in our final agenda item, we're going to open the discussion up a little bit with community concerns or Q&A, where I want to have an opportunity to hear from you. For this portion of our meeting, we're going to welcome to the conversation Reverend Paul Anderson of the Fountain Church on Six Forks Road. Paul, thanks for being with us tonight. Would you like to introduce yourself and give us any thoughts or comments you have on the conversation we've been having or anything going on in the community?
Sure, Councilor Buffkin. First of all, I want to say thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. And I guess before we get started, I want to ask everybody who would just do this exercise with me, okay? If you would just inhale and then exhale. Do it again, inhale and then exhale, because most of you look like you were holding your breath the entire time, okay? And so, Mickey, I understand what you're saying. Just give you a quick overview of a little bit of who I am. I'm a native of Charlotte, North Carolina. My parents were sharecroppers from Wilkes County, rural Georgia. Moved to North Carolina to get a better footing in life. I graduated from West Charlotte High School in 1980. Then I went to North Carolina Central University, got an undergraduate degree in business administration with a concentration in management with a minor in finance and computers and information systems and accounting. I thought I was going to be an accountant. I played tennis, got hit in the eye with a tennis ball. That changed everything, so I couldn't see all those numbers. And then I became a banker. I was licensed to preach and started preaching when I was a high school student. And then I went to Southeastern Seminary after I did my banking tour, which was about 3.5 years. Then I spent a few years doing insurance and financial services, working right there in the North Hills area. And then I started pastoring full time. I did part-time pastoring, 5 years at a church in Creedmoor called Rock Spring Baptist Church. And then I spent approximately 18 years at Baptist Grove Church, which is just outside of District A at the intersection of Leesville and Lynn. And I'm currently the pastor of the Fountain of Raleigh Fellowship, which I organized about right at 11 years ago. So I have served in the city for quite a few years. I've been a part of the Human Relations Commission. I was actually the chair for that. I served on the Pedestrian and Bicycle Commission. I've served on the City of Raleigh's Planning Commission, and I am the senior volunteer chaplain for Raleigh Police Department. I've done community engagement, being on the board of directors at the Post Center, Urban Ministries, Habitat for Humanity. I serve on the NC State Chancellor's African American Advisory Commission, and I've been a former board member for the African American Complex over on Sunnybrook Road. So I've done a lot in the community because I believe in what we have been talking about this evening. And I think it's been very insightful, all that we've heard. Mickey, I thank you so very much for all of what you shared, and thank you for everybody what you shared. I want to say this as we start our conversation. Patrick Buffkin is not new to District A. I've been in District A since about 1996, 97. And he worked with me on my campaign when I ran in District A. I was one of those persons when I ran, it was a 50-50 split, and it became absentee ballots that made the difference. And then I ran at large, and I want to say thank you, Patrick, for helping me in my campaign. It built you to be the city councilor you are today. So we're so grateful, and we thank God for you. So I think we have some questions that people want to ask. I'd like to jump out, Patrick, and ask you, first of all, if you would sort of speak to some of the questions that we saw in the background from the citizens. I don't think you can answer all of the questions at this moment, but I'm certain you're going to carve out time to do that. But one of those questions I think everybody is asking, or it appears as though, what can we do to have greater communication between the citizenry as well as those who serve as elected city councilors, so we can have this synergy of having those who are the community and those who are the elected officials working together on a collaborative basis. And Councilor Stewart, it's so great to see you there as well. And I did see some former city councilors. I saw Russ Stevenson in the chat and others. So if you would, please jump in with that. And then I think there'll be other questions that we want to bring to the forefront. So if you would, go ahead and start with that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul, and thank you for being with us. I am really invested in this job and in this community, and I'm concerned with what I'm hearing, and I'm going to work hard to make it better. You know, as Mickey alluded to, you know, we need to get back to talking to each other again. You know, we need to get back to a place where we can disagree with each other without hating each other. And we need to rebuild trust. And I'm committed to doing that. I want to do that. And, you know, those places where I have contributed to loss of trust, I regret that. And I can't change what's happened in the past, but I can certainly work to make it better in the future. You know, without making excuses, and this is really not meant to be excuses, but this is a incredibly challenging time, and this is a difficult job. As Raleigh has grown up and kept a part-time city council and part-time mayor, the challenges of working full-time and giving my home life the time and attention that it needs and deserves, and responding to the emails, phone calls, and social media activity is a real challenge. I promise you I'm doing my best. And frequently I find that people who I simply disagree with feel like they're not being listened to. And I try hard to explain the decisions I make in a way that I hope is rational and coherent, and at least demonstrates that I do listen to people. I do care about what people think, but I also have a vision for the future of the city, and I'm going to pursue that because I believe that's what's in the public interest. So we can have fundamental disagreements about policy and what we want our city to be, but we should be able to do it in a respectful way, and a way that doesn't lead to loss of trust, and hopefully leads to building trust, because there are times when we're going to disagree on certain issues, but there'll be times when we agree on other issues. So, you know, this meeting tonight, as an example of how challenging this job can be, it's taken lots of work to stand up. We've never done this before in the city, this Zoom meeting, virtual meeting format. And it's taken months and months of work with dozens of city staff people to stand up this capability. And I know that if I was sitting on the other end of this line, I would be feeling like that's not a very impressive explanation, but it is true. It has been a real challenge to stand up this capability, but I want to do this, and I want to do more of it. I miss being out at meetings and public gatherings and having all those conversations we can have outside of a meeting, on the sidelines of a meeting, bumping into each other on the street, out in restaurants, that kind of thing. And so we really have been limited by this pandemic situation, but that is not an excuse. We are working hard to get through it. And I do want to remind folks that we're going to take questions from the chat function, and we're also going to try to give you a chance to speak live to us. So we're going to use the raise hand function to do that, and the raise hand function is going to put you in order by the time you raise your hand, and we'll go down the list and respond to as many questions as we can during the time we have. We got about 30 minutes remaining. And it's my intention to respond to each and every person who has questions or concerns tonight, although I may not be able to provide a verbal response in this meeting. For example, your question involves some background research or maybe some more details that I need. I may need to ask you to follow up by email or phone call, and I'd be glad to help you out with whatever question or concern you have. And if we run out of time, please, please feel free to reach me by email, phone, social media, whatever you feel comfortable. With that, Paul, if you want to start working down our list of folks that have raised hands, or if you want me to call out a few questions from the chat box. Thank you for leading our discussion.
How about if I can do this first? Let's do a combination of both. If you would, let me say this first of all. I know this is your first pandemic, and it's all of our first pandemic, so we know the situations are totally different and unique. But if you could say a little bit about CACs, because I see there has been quite a bit of conversation about CACs, and then coupled with that, can you segue into curfews and how those are, how does that come about? Is that done by the mayor? Is that done by the city council? And talk about the impact that it has to the business community, because from what I see in the chat, it impacts quite a few people, because I understand fast food restaurants and others, if the curfew is at 9, they have to shut down at 8 and they have to do close down operations. And those who are basic workers getting minimum wage, that drastically reduces their ability to have an affordable place to live because their income has been reduced. So if you could say a little bit about that, and then why don't you pick the next one after that? We'll do it back and forth.
Yeah, sure. So I'll take the last one first. One of the heartbreaking realities about this whole situation is that the people who are least able to weather this stressful time are the ones that are getting the brunt of the pain. Hospitality workers, as you mentioned, are a group that really stands out as really being hurt the most. And it's just heartbreaking to watch. So we've been working to stand up support on that. On the housing issue, our voters have an important opportunity to help out the people who are struggling in our city with our housing bond that'll ballot this fall. I've actually already voted in favor of it and turned in my ballot to the Board of Elections last week. So we have voted early, and our civic duty has been discharged on that point. On the CACs, the experience has been, and Mickey spoke to this, that people who were invested in the CACs feel that pain from the broken trust and the surprise and the lack of being invited to the conversation before the decision was made. I acknowledge that. Again, there's nothing I can do to change it today. But I would remind everyone that there was widespread dissatisfaction with the CAC system. Here in North Raleigh, our CACs were too big, and they had been for a long time. Particularly in the north part of District A, you take neighborhoods along Lead Mine Road and up around Strickland, who are in the North CAC, they would have a 30-minute drive to Ebbets Creek Community Center. So a lot of them just didn't participate in the CACs. Midtown grew tremendously. Another problem, at least as I saw, and I think that was widely recognized, that the CAC district, the CAC lines, boundaries did not align with council districts. So you have some quirks of geography. Like, for example, I live in a neighborhood that's a part of the Atlantic CAC, which is by far the exception for District A. Midtown goes south of the Beltline and crosses 2 council districts, and that creates some problems. Likewise, North CAC, the old boundary for North CAC crossed 2 council districts, and it had gotten quite large. So there was, I think, a broad recognition that CACs could have been improved, and I'm approaching this all with an open mind. I want to hear from the community. I want to hear from Mickey about what he's hearing from the community, and we'll have that process play out most of the rest of this year, and we'll take up the issue when we get our report back. It really is a sincere effort to give more people a voice in city government. It truly is. So I hope that answered the question. I'd be glad to take a few more. Uh-oh, Paul, we got you on mute.
Yeah, okay, it was
There we
going back
go.
and forth. I think I was helping myself and someone else was helping me as well. Why don't you go ahead and pick this one, pick any one that you'd like, and I have the next one. So take a look at it. How about maybe the fourth one from the bottom?
Let's see. I think, let's see. I think I'm getting lost in the chat section. Paul, could I,
Okay, no problem.
I see my neighbor Teresa has her hand up. Could I try
Yes.
unmuting her and give her a chance to talk?
Yes, please go ahead.
Let's see. Where did she go?
Okay, I'm here.
There she is.
Okay, good. Thanks. I want to thank y'all for doing this. I know that it's kind of uncomfortable given the history of some things that have happened in District A, and just thrilled to have this opportunity. For people that don't know some background, I need to provide just a little bit because it goes with my question. Z4119 was a rezoning from R6 and one little section of R4 right next to Shelley Lake, and it was rezoned to RX. It was very frustrating for many of us in our community because of the traffic concerns. Looking at the 2030 comprehensive plan, it was not in the plan to make that area be something like an RX when something smaller could work. But we know that the city was trying to get as much housing as they could, which totally made sense. We're looking at, there's no infrastructure really, walkability to only the park existed, no hotels, restaurants, grocery stores, anything like that within walking distance, and very limited transit that will ultimately take you to 2 malls. The housing was going to be and is going to be luxury housing. We were concerned about the 4th generation family of 3 houses back there who also own a corner property that we're really concerned about the stormwater runoff and things going into that area. We were worried about the density. Bob Gary talked about the fact that the density was going to be like 18 an acre and not the 14, which the 2030 comprehensive plan said would be the max for moderate residential. You know, so we had a lot of concerns. We kept being assured that don't worry, these things will be taken care of. Everybody will be protected. The buildings are going to match or be harmonious with the established character of the neighborhood, yada, yada, yada. So fast forward, it gets rezoned.
Susan, could you please ask your question, because we want to make sure we give you and everyone ample time, because I think you've already used about 3 minutes. Okay.
So we've got the 15 an acre public hearing. We have the public hearing, we have the 24-hour comment, and then they change it to maximum 112 dwelling units. Now, at administrative site plan review, I'm being told by the guy, one of the planners, Purifoy, sorry, I'm saying his name probably wrong. He's telling me that if we have any issue with the fact that these flat top buildings don't fit the established neighborhood, and that is 17 plus an acre, we were supposed to have had that dealt with at Planning Commission way before. And we're like going, well, wait a minute, they told us it would happen during site review. So my question is what do we do now? Because we have major concerns. We don't have green stormwater infrastructure, so that property that's owned by someone other than the developer is really at risk of being just totally annihilated. We've got 17 plus an acre when we were gonna have to live with 15 plus. I mean, it's just not making sense, Patrick. And we need your help.
All right, Teresa, thanks for that comment. Let me do some research on the site plan process. My understanding is that site plans do not come to council for review. It's all administrative review. So, you know, not seeing an opportunity to vote on this is making me wonder how I'm going to help, but let me look into it, and I will get back with you.
Okay. I'm looking at the chat and I'm trying to look at raised hands. So help me if you see a hand raised, because I was trying to look at something from the chat.
Sure, we certainly invite folks to raise hands. I saw a question in there about curfews, Paul, and could I
Yes.
just take a minute to speak to that?
If you
So, my experience in the past several months with the situation around the civic unrest and the social protests has been that the curfews are really an indispensable tool for our police to sort out the people who come here with a heart of social justice, that want to change the way our world is treating particularly folks of black and brown skin, and particularly on the policing issues. But it's actually broader than that, in my opinion. And those folks, you know, my heart is with them. I'm for the cause. I want to help with that. And those folks have a constitutional right to come out and speak and demonstrate and express their views. And I support them having the opportunity to exercise their rights. And what we've seen on multiple occasions is that there is another group of people that shows up when protests are going on, and they blend in with the crowd, but they bring none of the good-natured reform intent that the social justice movement has. These folks come with the sole intent to cause damage, chaos, and division in our community. The mayor spoke to that on Sunday morning, and I found her comments to be spot on. This is inappropriate behavior. We aren't going to tolerate it. And on Saturday evening, 15 people got arrested for participating in it. So and actually on Saturday night, we didn't even get to curfew enforcement. Most everybody was gone by 11 o'clock when the curfew came into effect. We have evolved our curfew regulation to accommodate some questions that we'd be getting about people who were concerned were going to break the curfew by walking their dog or traveling to or from work. So we have tried to help out on that, and we've tried to be practical with our enforcement. So I did see one question about whether or not curfews can be just part of the city or have to be citywide. That, I think, is a legal question. I'll have to look into that and get some more information on that. But thus far, we have taken the approach of a citywide curfew. And part of the reason is because those bad actors that are coming and infiltrating the social justice protest movement are coming from outside of the city. So we've got to be careful about how we use that tool. We don't want to trample on people's civic rights. We don't like putting curfews in place. It's a very difficult decision every time we have to do it. But the consequences of not having a curfew and needing it are just too great when we have the actionable intelligence that our police force is gathering that problems may be coming to our community. So I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. Patrick, there's also a question about affordable housing in District A. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Or I guess you call it workforce housing, whatever terminology you choose to help us by understanding how those who are at minimum wage can find a livable place in District A.
Yeah, and it's good to observe that both terms are ambiguous in a sense that they mean different things to different people. So we have a city policy that calls for housing affordability to be spread throughout the city, so that we don't create pockets in the city that are made up of people of very low incomes. I thought, going way back to December, our first council work session of this term, Durham Mayor Steve Schewel came over and he spoke to this, the kind of tragic living situations that communities have created by concentrating people of low incomes in very few places. I mean, you think of places like Cabrini Green in Chicago and Marcy House in Brooklyn. We don't want to repeat those same mistakes. Those places become really, really negative places for the community and for the people that live there, particularly the children. And I thought Mayor Schewel put it really well, that focusing on the children, these children need role models, and they need to see people who of all types that go to jobs where they work with their hands, or jobs where they move paper, people of all types. And so that is an important ideal that is reflected through our housing bond proposal. There's been a lot of discussion about why not more focus on people making 30% of area median income, which no doubt is a really desperate situation. We're talking roughly $25,000 a year for a family of 4 or so. I wouldn't want to be quoted on those numbers, but those are rough numbers of who we're talking about. So we're talking about people who are really, really struggling. And two things about that. One, in our affordable housing developments, we need a mix of income to foster that kind of diverse community, a healthy community where there are people who come from all backgrounds, all walks of life, and the children there can see people of different colors, of different backgrounds. Sorry about the cat. And take their role models from their neighbors. And then a second point on that is, and I already spoke to the concentration in those types of what we think of as traditional housing projects. And I don't think those are healthy communities. And then lastly, just the money part of it is we have to be realistic about what we can do. When you target housing to the lower incomes, you have to increase the subsidy. And if we were going to do affordable housing development just for people at 30% AMI and below, basically the city would have to do it by itself. The city would not be able to finance that type of housing development. So we'd have to come up with all the cash, and we'd have to spend probably 150, 180 per unit. And structuring our housing affordability through these tax credit programs and mixed income developments gets our subsidy level down to around 30, 35,000 per unit, so we can help a lot more. So I hope that was helpful in answering that question.
Yeah, could you say something as it relates to affordable housing? Does the city have any kind of relationship with Habitat of Wake County to help people have affordable living? Is there some relationship? Are there some dollars that the city is putting forward to help make that happen?
Yes, absolutely. So we have two sides of that. We have some existing programs and partnerships, including Habitat, that we will continue to do. I'm particularly excited about an upcoming project that one of our nonprofits called CASA is working on. So more to come on that, but yes, we are definitely going to lean on our community partners because these are the people that are on the ground. They do the work, they put the deals together, they structure the financing, and they have experience in the development process. So we're certainly going to lean on them. I don't think the government has all the answers here, and I don't think it needs to come up with all the answers. I think we can do a lot of good by partnering with the private sector, including nonprofits and for-profit developers.
Okay, we got a tough question here from Chantal. She said, how do you give a voice in government when you act in secret and take away others' voice?
I think that's a good question, although I don't agree with the premise. The council does not act in secret. It may have surprised people, and I know that the I hear the criticism about the secret vote on the CAC. It was not in secret, it was in open meeting, just like all the council's decisions. I've also heard in the last month or two different rounds of rumors that have come up about either the city council in secret or the mayor in secret not letting police use tear gas or telling the police they can't use riot gear. Both are false rumors. It didn't happen. There hadn't been any decision like that, and our council does not meet in secret. What I think those folks are saying, and what I understand they are saying, is they should have had an opportunity to know what was happening before it happened, and they should have had an opportunity to come and voice their opinions before the decision was made. And I agree. And I don't think it should have been done that way. It was presented as the only opportunity to improve citizen engagement during this 2-year term. And so I voted for it with the hopes that we would have a robust process on how to improve citizen engagement. All of that's been very disrupted by COVID, as we have discussed with Mickey earlier today. But I am once again extending the hand of friendship to everyone, including people who are involved in CACs. I want to work with you. I'm available to talk with you, and I'm available to meet with you when we can. And I saw a suggestion that I have more meetings like this, maybe in a more private interactive setting to talk about community engagement. I'd certainly be glad to do that. These are city resources we're using, so I do have limits on the amount of time and number of meetings I can do, but certainly smaller group meetings are definitely something that we can get in the works. And I would just a final point on that is our meetings talking together shouldn't take place of participating in the process with Mickey Fern. That process needs to be informed by lots of diverse views, and I am not interested in short-circuiting that process. I want it to play out. I want Mickey to hear from the community, and I want the council to hear from the community through Mickey and get Mickey's advice on how to move forward.
Yeah, I think Mickey said that he would present information and not so much give too much advice, if I thought I heard him correctly. I see a hand that's raised by Becky. Becky, I'm going to unmute you and give you an opportunity to ask your question. Or I think I'm going to unmute you, or if somebody can help me unmute Becky.
Hi, Becky, are you with us?
Oh, I think she's gone. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
I thought I saw her hand raised. How about Roger, period? Roger, are you there? I was scrolling to see what.
If you can just give me a minute, we do have Becky, but we are trying to unmute her. Just give me one moment.
All right, good. Thank you.
That's the voice of Stacy Lundy, Council Policy Assistant. And she helps me out in the council office. If you call down there, you'll get Stacy. She's a wonderful person. She's been a big help to me. She put a lot of time and effort into getting our meeting coordinated here today. And I certainly appreciate all the work you're doing behind the scenes.
Thank you, Patrick. Miss Becky, I sent you a request to unmute, if you can see that. Okay, do you want to move on to the next one who has their hand raised?
Yes, let's do. Let's go to R. Okay. R had their hand raised and said, are there grants available to help renovate houses for affordable housing and property owned by church, it says. I guess the question generally, are there grants available for renovating houses for affordable living through the city?
That's a great question. I'm going to have to do some background research on that. I'm sure there are a lot of, and in fact, the city does get quite a bit of grant money from the federal government through the Community Development Block Grant Program. That's often referred to by its acronym CBDG, Community Development Block Grant, CDBG money. So we spend a lot of money on that in the housing area, and we will continue to do that. That is part of our existing funding, and we'll certainly be taking full advantage of that and making sure that our bond funding works in concert with it, and we're not duplicating or missing opportunities. So I'll have to get back on a more complete answer on grant funding. But the one I'm most familiar with is CDBG through the federal government.
Okay. I'm scrolling. I don't see any more hands raised. Stacy, do you see any other hands that have been raised?
No, sir, not in the participant box.
Okay, I'm looking in the chat to see if there's another question that someone had. Someone said Larry is raising his hand. Where's Larry?
Yeah, I saw Larry's question, and Larry's question was for me and Councilor Stewart. I'm not sure that she's still on the line, but if she is, she's welcome to weigh in. Ask if they, meaning us, buy into the community engagement process. And Larry's comment was they, meaning me and Nicole, don't show interest at council meetings and do not vote in accordance with the public. So yes, I am invested in the community engagement process. I hope that this meeting here tonight reflects that. I could have had this meeting on any subject. I know that there's a lot of interest around community engagement and a lot of appetite for interacting with or hearing from Mickey Fern. So that's what tonight was all about. And I hope that it'll advance Mickey's work to a really positive result. But I'm taking to heart his words. It's not his problem to solve. It's not him to bring us a solution. It's for all of us to work together and, get better at working with each other. And it's going to be tough because, we're dealing with a lot of challenging issues as a fast growing city, and we're not all going to agree. And our national environment is just causing a lot of stress and trauma. And I think that's reflected in our local politics right now. And it's an incredibly challenging time. But again, my door is open, and I extend a hand of friendship to each and every person that is willing to come with a constructive approach to keep the city moving forward.
Patrick, you had said you wanted to give room for Nicole. Nicole, did you want to comment?
Sure, I would just echo Patrick's sentiments and say that I also very much am committed to this community engagement process. And I do think part of the most important piece of this is the process. Just like Mickey said, he's not going to hand us a report that says, okay, now go do step A, B, and C. But rather going through this process together as a community will help us build something even greater than any of us individually could have imagined. So I am absolutely committed to community engagement and committed to this process. So, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you for commenting. We're at 8:58. Patrick, thank you for allowing me to help in this process. It looks like we have 2 minutes left, and I would hate for anyone to rob you of the 2 minutes for your closing comments. I'm certain you probably have some, so if you would please share those with everyone. And I just want to say thank you to everybody. I think we have people dropping off because it is getting close to 9.
Yes, and I hear that there's a debate going on tonight, and I'm sure lots of people are interested in seeing that. It's been a really good experience this evening to have everybody with us. And Paul, my thanks to you. Thanks, Mickey and Councilmember Stewart for being with us. Thanks again to the staff for all the support. I hear you all, and again, I'm committed to working this process and trying to rebuild trust. I know we got work to do, and I'm committed to doing it. It's not going to be easy. We've also got lots of issues facing the city. And lots of these issues weren't issues last year, dealing with COVID, social unrest. But I assure you, my heart's in it. I love this community. I want good things for this community. And I hope that part of my work on council can be healing some of the wounds in our community psyche. I would really like to see that happen. And you all, again, my door's open to you. Let's see what we can do to keep in touch more often. And if you have if you have a question or comment that you were not able to share tonight, again, my contact information is in the chat box at the top of the chat. And I would love to hear from you. Again, grateful that everybody was able to get on and join us tonight. I think this work is really important, and it's, of course, important for us all to stay connected and feel as much sense of community as we can during this difficult time. So I'm going to close with that. And again, my thanks to everybody for participating. You've given me a lot to think about. I see Reverend Anderson.
Yeah, one more thing before you sign off. There was a question asked earlier. Is this going to be on some other medium where others can see this or view this? Could you just say a quick word about that if you can, or if you can't, either way?
Yeah, thank you for that. I saw a couple of those and responded in the chat box that we're still researching how to how best to post this for later viewing. So I've gotten a few questions, and checking with city staff on how we're doing this. This meeting is a first for me. It's a first for the city, and we're working through important considerations like open meetings laws, Public Records Act, making sure that we're not using city resources inappropriately for something like campaigning. So what seems like a simple question is not so straightforward when you get down to dealing with the complexities of how exactly you do it. And yes, a couple other members of council have had meetings like this earlier in the year. That was before we had this function as a city-supported resource. And that change is material, and it requires careful consideration. However, I will do everything I can to make it accessible. I don't know how much interest there will be in watching it after the fact, but we will work on it and try to get an answer or get the video posted. So I think that probably brings us to a close, and grateful for everybody sticking around till the end with us. I hear the TV on in the next room, so it sounds like it's presidential debate time, and I wish you all the very best, particularly our Jewish neighbors who are in the high holy season. I wish you all the best for your holiday season. And you all feel free to reach out to me anytime, all of you. And thanks again for being with us tonight.
Yeah, I'm Kapoor. All right, goodbye.